Welcome to the Untold Truths. Join me as we venture into the dark world of incels and the ways in which they seek revenge. How many relationships have you experienced? For most, the answer is at least one. But for some, it's zero. We call these people incels, meaning they struggle to find romantic love. At least, that's what it meant in the beginning when a woman named Alana invented the word in the 1990s. Since then, there emanated a rich incel subculture that persisted beyond any one particular community or group, from which terms like Chad, Stacy, Lookism, and Black Pill were popularized, and figures like Egghead appeared. But within it, there emerged an ideology that has been described as terrorist by the United States government, which should come as no surprise given the dark, vile topics we will soon be touching upon. Nowadays, incel refers to a scattered online community of angry, misogynistic men whom believe they're entitled to sex but are doomed to a life alone with no love and no girlfriend. Some of these men who couldn't find romance eventually did, and those whom haven't, maybe one day will. Except for the incels who murder girls because of it, like George Sodini, Elliot Rodger, and Alek Minassian. But our journey commences long before the days of these mass murderers. It begins in 1938 in the small village of Kamo, Japan. Back then, men used to sneak out late at night, creep into girls' bedrooms, and try to seduce them. They called it yobai, or nightcrawler, and it was a common Japanese practice until the modern age. Enter Mutsuo Toi, a 21-year-old nightcrawler that was rejected by every girl whose bedroom he entered. See, Toi contracted tuberculosis, so the ladies found him gross, and his neighbors treated him like crap. He needed revenge. One unfateful night, Toi cut power to the village. Pitch black. He strapped 2 flashlights to his head and prowled the village streets. He entered one house after the other, slaughtering those inside with a katana, an axe, a dagger, or a gun. He had it all. Toi exterminated nearly half of his village, killing 29 neighbors. He retreated to a nearby mountain and by the break of dawn fatally shot himself twice in the chest. If you believe in ghosts, then you best believe the grounds on which the village stood remains haunted to this day. George Sodini, a successful 48-year-old systems analyst but romantic failure, had a similar mindset to Toi. But instead of cutting off the power, he turned off the lights. Quite literally. George entered a women's aerobic class at night, hit the light switch, and then pulled out 2 handguns and fired into the darkness. Long story short, he couldn't get laid in nearly 20 years, according to blog entries and video uploads he made in the months prior to the killing. And it baffled him. He had a good paying job, worked out, and maintained good hygiene, but nothing worked. After shooting 12 girls, killing 3 of them, he turned the gun on himself and committed suicide. But the most famous of examples is Elliot Rodger, whose story introduces us to the modern age of violent incels. His story goes something like this. On May 23rd, 2014, 22-year-old Elliot Rodger fatally stabbed 2 of his roommates and one of their friends in his apartment. Then, like any normal person would do, Elliot hopped inside his car, drove to a Starbucks, and got himself a nice, hot triple vanilla latte. But this wasn't the end of it. It was only just the beginning. After giving himself a nice old treat, Elliot got back to business. He had to let the world know what was going on. He sat inside of his car with a laptop and uploaded a pre-recorded, hate-ridden goodbye video to YouTube that explained everything. In a 7-minute-long video, Elliot explained how it was a crime that girls gave themselves to other men, but not to him, how he hated other men for being sexually active instead of him, and detailed exactly how he was going to punish humanity for these injustices. Elliot then emailed a 100,000-word manifesto to everyone he knew in life, including his family, his childhood friends, and his therapist. It was then time. Elliot drove to Alpha Phi, a sorority house full of girls. He knocked on the door for minutes on end, but no girl answered. He was rejected like every other time in his life. So what did he do? He skipped to the next part of his plan, jumped back in his car, and drove around shooting at people and running them over. He shot 2 women, injured a 3rd, hit a pedestrian, hit a skateboarder. It went on and on and on. Eventually, he wound up in a police chase, got shot in the hip, crashed his car, and shot himself in the head. All in all, 7 people died and many more injured. After the fact, Elliot Rodger's manifesto spread like wildfire throughout the incel community. Most people were disgusted by Elliot's actions, but others, no doubt sick in the head, praised him as a hero, viewing him as a young, relatable man that stood up against the unfair, unjust world of females that denied incels their right to have a girlfriend. But that's not all. To these ill-minded people, Elliot Rodger marked the beginning of the incel rebellion. This was a phrase first used by incel Alek Minassian, who continued Elliot Rodger's depraved work by driving a van into a crowd of people and killing nearly a dozen pedestrians on April 23rd, 2018. But unlike Elliot, Alek didn't kill himself. He lives behind bars, and I wonder if he has yet lived enough years to regret it. Probably not. Christopher Harper Mercer is another notable example of an incel turned mass murderer, as is Scott Byerly. But here's the thing. Not all incels were violent to others, but some to themselves instead. This is especially true for Christine Chubbuck. She was a 29-year-old American journalist who couldn't find love, so she killed herself on live television by shooting herself in the head. But that was a long time ago, in 1974. Let's move past her for the moment, take a step back, and ask ourselves, why? Why is it incels face such difficulty in finding a partner? And why do they go on to commit mass murders? Obviously, most never do, but nonetheless, the question stands. Well, in the case of Elliot Rodger, it was all in his head. He was never actually rejected because he never actually approached girls. Instead, he waited for the girls to approach him. But for every girl that didn't approach him, he viewed it as a rejection. So in his own head, he must have been rejected hundreds, if not thousands, of times. Sounds crazy, I know, because that's exactly what he was. The point is that people like Elliot, George Sodini, and Alek Minassian view the world in broken ways that they are only half aware of, if at all. But each of their minds were unique, broken in different ways that all led to the same ending. It's like a different song, but the same melody, at least to an extent. One important characteristic that incel mass murderers seem to share is an extreme, overwhelming sense of entitlement. In their minds, they deserve more than you, and they deserve more than me. But because of their broken ways of thinking, these murderers think they get nothing, whereas you get everything, even if that's not true. But the truth doesn't matter when they're the ones with the gun and you're the one out for a daily stroll. In that moment, you're the problem, not them, in their head, at least. This is my understanding of it, but I'd be curious to hear yours. But for now, we must conclude. I thank you for joining me on this adventure. It has been a trip, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Untold Truths. And remember, you're the frog in the boiling water, and I'm the chef slowly turning up the heat.